Welcome to episode 5 of the Here We Go podcast. I'm your host, Trent Ging. Today we're going to be talking about the tight end room. Now, the tight end room, I think, is actually maybe the room with the most question marks on the offense. And the reason I say that is because of how Arthur Smith likes to incorporate the tight ends. And typically, it's not just one tight end. It's multiple tight ends into this offense. He likes to run a lot of 12 personnel. So how does this current group fit with what Arthur Smith has traditionally done? I'm going to start today by talking about Pat Freiermuth. So I'm going to start by saying I actually think Pat Freiermuth is a really solid tight end. But I remember back to preseason last year when it looked like Kenny Pickett and our offense was about to set the world on fire. People started talking about him like he's going to creep into the top 10 tight end list. Some people were saying he's going to crack the top 5. Even then, I thought that was a bit extreme. But the way that they're talking about using Pat Freiermuth this season, you almost need him to be a top 10 tight end, right? Like, I mean, if he's going to be a focal point of this offense, you almost need him to be a top 10 type guy. Is he capable of being a top 10 guy? That's going to be the biggest question that I think we're going to have to find as the season goes on. Who was Arthur Smith's last move tight end? It was Kyle Pitts. Now, Kyle Pitts was a guy who was taken very high in the draft, in the first round. He was a guy that a lot of people said was basically a wide receiver, built like a tight end. Now, he and Pat Freiermuth definitely have one thing in common. Neither of them can block. But I don't know that Pat Freiermuth is nearly as athletic as Kyle Pitts. And I think that's the part, for me, that I have a hard time seeing that's working right now. Excuse me. I think that Pat Freiermuth is a guy who allegedly was working with a speed and agility coach, and you hope he improves. But, I mean, there's improvement you can make. But I feel like he needed more than just an improvement to become a move tight end. I was trying to think of a comp, like a player comp for Pat Freiermuth. And Steeler fans who've been around for a while, they want to, compare him to Heath Miller. Yeah, you're stretching it. He and Heath Miller don't have a lot in common outside of neither were overly athletic. They both were really good at becoming security blankets for the quarterback. They both are really good at showing their numbers to the quarterback to give themselves a big body target to throw to. They're both good at finding openings in a zone. Pat Freiermuth, I think, has above average hands. But is this a guy that you would consider a move tight end, a guy that you're going to split out wide and he's going to be lined up against a slot corner or nickel corner, whatever you want to call it, dime packages, where he's going to beat a corner one-on-one like what Travis Kelce does? I don't know that he's that guy. I hope he is, because that's what they're going to ask him to do. But I don't know that he's capable of that. I mean, he was considered more of a receiving tight end coming out of Penn State. So who knows? Maybe this actually unlocks his true potential and what he should have been utilized as all along. But I don't remember his combine numbers being overwhelmingly athletic. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see. Again, I do think he's a solid tight end in the NFL. He's probably more of a middle of the pack type guy. But we're not going to ask him to be a middle of the pack type guy. We're going to ask him to be a top 10 type guy. if you're really putting him in a true move tight end type of role. And because we don't really have a wide receiver two, he's probably going to be number 2 on the team in targets. Can he fill that role? I mean, you're not just talking about a middle of the road tight end if you're going to make him your second wide receiver on the team. So I think this season is going to put a lot on his shoulders. And if the team wants to keep him around, it's in the team's best interest to sign him to a contract now, because if he is the wide receiver too, and he has, the ability to play this role that Arthur Smith wants him to play, his payday is going to go through the roof. Now, from the other side of the thing, Pat probably shouldn't sign a contract extension right now. He should probably let this thing play out and bet on himself if he believes that he can fit this role and he fits this offense really well, because he's going to line himself up for a big payday. So among the things that I'm going to be watching, as obviously we're in the mini camps now, but I really am interested once they get to Latrobe and those pads go on. I want to see what he does in full contact situations, much like I talked about with Calvin Austin in the last episode. I want to see what he does at full speed, full contact scenarios. Can he run routes the way that Arthur Smith needs him to run? And can he get open against man coverage and not just find holes in the zones? Should we be optimistic about him in this role? Well, the one thing I think you can look to, outside of the fact that I do think he has above average hands, I think that this guy has a chance to get back to being one of the yak leaders on the team if he really is the second target. Now, Jaylen Warren's going to lead that group in yak this year, because George Pickens is probably going to catch a lot of deep balls from Russell Wilson, and you're not going to get a whole lot of yards after catch on deep balls. Now, he turned on that a little bit last year with what we saw from him expanding the route tree, so it's possible he leads the team. But Jaylen Warren catches so many balls out of the backfield, and I anticipate him being a big target share guy this year. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. But Pat Freiermuth absolutely could come back to form and really be a guy who creates some yards after the catch, not necessarily because of the athleticism, but because he's big and physical, and I think he has decent balance, especially for a tight end. We don't talk about tight ends having good balance a lot of times. It's more of a running back type term. It's more of a wide receiver type term in the way that they, contort their body on catches and keep their feet in bounds and this and that. But I'll say this, I think Pat actually has pretty decent balance for a tight end. And that allows him to run through contact sometimes and gain those extra yards. So that's one thing that I can be optimistic about with him. I'm not going to be sold on his athleticism. I'm still going to stay skeptical until I see it. I feel like this is a situation where it could be an absolute success for him and he blows up, or it could be a complete and total failure, and this guy ends up looking like more of a Mike Gesicki that you talked about. He should be a receiving tight end, and then he's bouncing around the league because he can't block either. I mean, if you're not a blocking tight end and you aren't a good separator and more of an elite receiver at the tight end position, what is your value? So this is why I'm really interested, and why I have a lot of question marks around the tight end room, is because the leader of that tight end room is going to be asked to do so much more and so many different things than what he's been asked to do in the past, that I'm really, really intrigued by how this thing plays out. Now, the second question mark that I'm going to have, and again, I mentioned that Arthur Smith likes to run 2 tight end sets. Darnell Washington going into his second season. His first season, like many rookies, wasn't very good. I think you saw flashes from him in the blocking game, but he came into the league as a blocking tight end, and he had some rough games. I mean, he had some really, really rough games. I'm trying to think back. I think it was the Houston Texans game. The Grenard, who's the edge rusher from Houston. That dude had a field day. I mean, he had a field day against our tackles too, but I mean, he had a field day against Darnell Washington. His speed and his quickness and some of the pass rush moves and even the moves he were using just to get to the ball carriers on handoffs. He ate Darnell Washington alive. Now, that was early in the season for Darnell. He did get better as the season went on, but it still wasn't good. I mean, for a guy who was coming in as a blocking guy, it wasn't good. And quite honestly, tight ends as a rookie, they really do not play well. I mean, it's not surprising that he didn't have a great season, but you would have hoped to have seen him hold his own a little bit better than he did in the blocking game. I think you saw flashes, and I felt like, and I'm not looking at any analytics on this. This is strictly my opinion, and this is strictly kind of like an eye test type thing. But I felt like he looked better lining up next to Broderick Jones, maybe because of the familiarity from college. But it looked like they both fired off the ball better and were more comfortable at getting off the ball and getting to their blocks when they were lined up next to each other. And I thought you saw some flashes there. So there's a lot of room to say I think he's going to be fine as a blocker this year. And he's going to clean up a lot of the things that he learned as a rookie. And sometimes trial by fire can be a good thing, because that's how some guys take a second-year leap. The thing that I'm not very optimistic about is I don't know how this guy is going to be a second target as a tight end. I mean, not a second target on the team, but just a second guy to be on the field and get targets as a receiver. Now, he tested at the combine very well. He was very athletic, but none of that seems to translate to the field. He is not a good route runner. He's very clunky. He's almost awkward, right? I mean, he's almost awkward in his route running. You know, I mean, he just kind of like jogs out there like, hey, I'm definitely not going to get the ball, so I don't even know why they got me out here. That's how I feel like. I feel like he runs his routes. It's crazy. Now, of course, he's going to claim he's been working on his route running this offseason, but Jesus, I mean, you have to do something. It's got to be better than what it was last year. What do you have, 7 catches for like 110 yards? I don't think his ceiling as a receiver is that high this year. Now, I think his targets and his catches will be significantly higher, even without him really improving much as a receiver. I just think that we look around at the team and there's not a lot at the wide receiver 2 position right now. George Pickens is going to demand a double team every time he's on the field. If Pat Freiermuth does become the second receiver on the team, then you've got to look at them really putting a focus on coverage around him as well, which should open up Darnell Washington a little bit, just because he's going to be kind of a forgotten guy out in the route. When you only have 2 guys who are proven to catch the ball, the defenses are going to make sure those 2 do not touch the ball. So I think his catches do improve this year. I think his absolute ceiling is 20. And that would be if Booth misses a game or maybe a game and a half. I think a realistic target for him is probably going to be 15. I don't think there's any way he eclipses 250 yards, and he might get 2 or 3 touchdowns just because he's huge. So you're not going to expect this guy to dive in here and all of a sudden be this game-changing receiving tight end. Now, Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith last year in Atlanta were very close in catches, fairly close in yardage, and were both touchdown threats. Do we have that? Can we say that we have that right now in Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth? I don't think so. I don't think anybody should be saying that confidently. So who are we going to put on the field who could prove they could be a second receiving threat? It's Connor Hayward, right? So moving on to Connor Hayward, he's a guy who's undersized. He's playing the tight end position at basically 230 pounds. And we list him as a tight end, but he's playing three positions. I mean, very, very rarely he plays fullback. I mean, virtually never. But he does play a little bit of fullback here and there. He's an H-back, and he's a tight end. He's really a guy who you can put certain packages together for to give a second receiving threat from that tight end position, but you're not going to trust him to line up on the edge and block a guy who's 280 pounds. It's a terrible mismatch. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he gets sprinkled in. Now, I actually like the way Connor plays. I mean, he plays very hard. He does have a knack for when he's on the field, finding a way to get the ball. And he does try to make plays. I mean, the game, I can't remember who they were playing at the time, so I apologize. But the game he caught the pass kind of on that short little flat route, and he runs and basically just dives headfirst over top of a guy to pick up a first down. I mean, that's all effort. And you like that out of a guy. And you expect it out of a guy in his position who really is more of a core special teamer. But the team does like to use him a lot in the passing game, especially in big passing situations. And when you don't have a lot in the wide receiver room, and again, Arthur Smith likes to use two tight ends in the receiving game, he might have a little bit of a bigger role. I'm not going to over-exaggerate it, but he might have a little bit of a bigger role this year than what fans might be expecting going into it. So it'll be interesting to see how his utilization changes from what we saw with Matt Canada to what we're going to see with Arthur Smith. I mean, you could easily see him never seeing the field because we want two tight ends on the field a lot, or you could see him getting some specialty packages and Arthur Smith getting a little creative on how to utilize a versatile guy like Connor Hayward. So, I mean, the last guy in the room, Michael Pruitt, I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about him. I know he's basically more of a core special team guy, more of a blocking tight end. He doesn't have much receiving production in his career. I don't think he's going to be here for more than just depth at this point. He's a guy who I'm pretty sure he's played in Tennessee and also Atlanta with Arthur Smith. But I'm pretty sure he played in Tennessee and Atlanta. So he understands Arthur Smith's offense. He understands the way that he coaches. There is some value he can bring to the tight end room and helping these other guys get up and running quickly. But he's going to be a depth piece. He'll make the team. I think the team carries 4 tight ends. He's going to be the 4th tight end. And I think he and Connor are primarily special teams guys. But he's not going to have much of a role outside of it's 3rd and short. We're going to line up and run the football. Darnell Washington and Pruitt's going to be on to be the blocking tight ends. And Pat Freiermuth is going to be standing on the sidelines drinking some Gatorade. That's going to be the extent of his role in the offense. So I think because of the uncertainty and the change in the philosophy of the offense is the reason why I say there's big question marks. I mean, I don't have a question mark again on Pat Freiermuth and his receiving ability, but the way he's going to be asked to be utilized, the way that Arthur Smith typically uses the 2 tight ends and wants both to be a threat in the receiving game, I think there's a lot to question here. I mean, a lot to question here. And I think it's fair to be very skeptical and say that this thing could very easily not work out. We'll find out. That's the only thing I can say. We'll find out. So again, I'm very excited to see the team get to Latrobe, put the pads on, and start going to work and start seeing people sharing more and more videos of what this team looks like as they get into full contact and how Arthur Smith's system plays into the success or lack thereof of this offense. So I hope you guys are all excited and ready to go just like I am. Thank you for watching. Again, as always, if you like the content, like and share. Really get back on this so I can try to improve this and make this worthwhile for you guys. It's a hobby to me. It's nothing that I'm looking to get famous or make money on. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this. Thank you. Have a great day.